For the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to turn inward a little bit, and we're going to kind of probe around at what makes us tick, literally. It's interesting. There's a young woman, well, relatively young, I should say, here in our congregation about 5-6 weeks ago, went into the doctor in the middle of the flu season, you know, when everybody had all the junk that was going around that never seemed to go away. Mm-hmm. And she has a history of colds every winter. And then she would oftentimes end up with bronchitis. And so she was sure that she had bronchitis again. And so she had called her doctor and said, hey, I think I have bronchitis. You know, what about those antibiotics that always work? And he said, well, you should come in and let us check you out. And she's going to actually be sharing here in a couple of weeks. We're going to have it on video. But she went in, and the doctor ran some tests. And he said, I'm going to run some more tests. And the more tests he ran, the more he began to investigate. And what he found is that you, in fact, don't have bronchitis. You have every one of your arteries is blocked that go to your heart. And you're not going anywhere. In fact, we're going to perform open heart surgery and in just a day or so. And so she ended up going into surgery and having, I didn't even know there was 5. I've heard of quadruple. This was quintuple bypass. Everyone, 80 to 90% blocked. And so that was a shocker to her, right? Like, whoa, I just thought it was an antibiotic, but actually it was something a little more invasive.
I think we've all kind of heard stories like that, something along that line of, you know, you expect something small and it turns into something big. And there's some of those things you just learn to ignore as you grow older, like my knee clicks, right? It just clicks. I don't know why. I can tell a doctor and I'll say, hey, my knee clicks. They're like, how old are you? I'm 47. Like, yeah, it's going to click now. Like, so you're not going to,
this is what you have to look forward to
scope it
over
or
here.
move a tendon from another spot, or he's like, you're not an athlete, dude. Just, it's going to click. You're fine. So there's some of that stuff you can live with. You know, like most of my vehicles are like that too. You know, if something starts making a lot of noise, you just turn up the radio. Like, this isn't worth fixing. We're just going to keep on driving. You know, like in the country, we just cover that just fine. But you can't ignore other things. You know, if you just blow them off and say, oh, it's just a cold and it's a heart, then she's gone in a day or two. It's over. And so that's kind of where we want to go. The series title is A Heart Monitor, because we've got to learn to pay attention to our heart. We're okay with symptoms. We're fine with complaining about symptoms, but we don't like to go deeper than that. And that's what we're going to be doing for the next several weeks, is looking at our heart and what that means.
And you hear the word heart. Like, we use heart all the time, don't we? And sometimes I think we don't even realize it. We say, oh, have you seen that movie? That movie just touched my heart, right? Or have you heard people say, you know, come on, put your heart into it, would you? Like, or we'd say, you know what? I'm done. My heart's just not in it anymore. Or we talk about someone though. Hey, you know what? Can we just have a heart-to-heart talk, right?
Or he's got a broken heart.
Oh yeah, he was in this, and they walked out and dumped him and dumped her, and now she's just got a broken heart. What are we talking about when we use that word heart in the Bible? In the Word of God, the word heart is used about 800 times. That's a lot, 800 times. But the interesting thing is, in all of those 800, it never is speaking about the blood pump. It's actually speaking about something a little more kind of mysterious, something a little more below the surface, something unseen. It's almost never about, it's not, hey, can my blood pump have a blood pump talk with yours, right? You didn't break my blood pump when you broke up with me. My heart is still, but you broke something inside of me. And what is that was broken? That loss I felt. My heart just aches, after this tragedy. In this series, what we're going to look at is several encounters that Jesus had with people. And on the surface, the encounters seem to be dealing with behavior. But what Jesus would do is he would look behind the behavior and take people to what was causing the behavior. He would look at what I would maybe call the symptoms, and then he would go to the root cause. Cholesterol. How many people have to watch your cholesterol, right? You go to the doctor and you've been eating all you want, whenever you want, your whole life. And then you hit an age and you go in and the doctor says, your cholesterol is through the roof. No more bacon, Tom, right? No more, no more cookies, no more. And so why? Because this doctor knows that cholesterol once in a while won't kill you, but the buildup at some point will block these things called arteries, and you will have a heart attack. Your heart will stop working. And so this series is kind of about, maybe we could have called it good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, I don't know, but it's this idea of what is going on beneath the surface.
So we're going to look at the first piece. We're going to actually look at this in two pieces, but the first one is just a single interaction that Jesus is having with the Pharisees. And it's a pretty common one in that it's just like Bruce describes. Let's unpack it in Mark 7, 1 through 6. It says, the Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. So the Pharisees and the Jews don't eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the traditions of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they don't eat unless they've washed their hands, and so they have all these traditions that they observe and the laws. But here's what he says. So the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, asked Jesus, why don't your disciples live according to the traditions of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands? And he replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, hypocrites, as it's written. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. And the place he's actually pulling from in Isaiah describes it even deeper in the second piece of that he doesn't quote. He says, their worship of me is based on merely human rules that they've been taught. He's saying, see what you're doing? You're dealing with the outside. Wash your hands, great. Absolutely why not wash your hands? But your hands could be completely clean. I'm looking past your hands into your heart. I'm telling you, your hearts are evil.
Think about this in our current culture. Our current culture, fill in the blank for me, images, everything, right? Well, everybody can be an Instagram model if you want. All you need is to open an account, right? It doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, what your behavior is like, as long as you look good. And so this idea of maintaining the image, we've had scandals the last few months of people who seemingly were just impeccable images of beauty or wealth or whatever, to come to find out, actually you're cheating, you're a cheater, you're a liar, you're a swindler, right? But the outside image is something our culture loves, almost to the point of, hey, don't worry about what's really, just the outside, as long as you look good. Remember, we have a saying for this, don't we? Fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it. In other words, it doesn't matter what's really going on inside you, just fake it. And so Jesus speaks to this.
They're hauling off Uncle Jesse's wife on Full House. You know what I'm talking about? And she just looks like the most wholesome aunt you'd ever want in the world, but she's a part of this scandal with the universities, and she's paid all this money. And here's a person and I'm not trying to pick on her, I don't know her life, but she's beautiful on the outside. I mean, gorgeous. And her life seems to have it all together, all the ducks in the row, kids going to the best schools. But when you look just below the surface, you're like, oh, wait a minute. There's some real unhealth here. You may think you got a few symptoms here and there you need to talk to a therapist about, but no, you need a heart surgeon. You need a transplant.
You know what we're describing here, what we're picking on here, is this is what secular means. Secular is this life that looks good on the outside, but it's hollow on the inside. God is absent. Mark Sayers, a pastor in Australia, says the definition of secular is progress without presence. We're getting smarter, we're getting stronger, we're getting wealthier, but we've lost something at the core, which is the presence of God, the presence of our Creator. We're created in His image, and we weren't designed to live without Him. So what happens is this secular mindset, even though the outside I have my religious traditions, Jesus is saying there's something hollow on the inside. Listen to His response. He goes on in the same chapter there. Jesus calls the crowd to Him and says, listen up, everybody, and understand this. Nothing outside a person defiles them by going into them. Rather, it's what comes out of a person that defiles him. After He had left the crowd and entered the house, the disciples asked Him about this parable. Jesus, washing hands is really important. We've been taught this our whole lives. What exactly are you talking about? And Jesus says, are you still so dull of understanding? Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside defiles them? Jesus is saying, careful where you look, careful what you pay attention to. Man, over the years, as Jason and I have gone through seasons of legalism in the church, of don't eat this, don't touch that, don't drink this, don't whatever. And now there's a place to take care of what's going in your body. But according to Jesus, he said, don't you see that nothing that enters a person can defile them? For it doesn't go into the heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body. In saying this, he declared that all foods are clean. He went on and said, what comes out of a person, that's what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and foolishness. All these evils come from the heart, and that's what defiles a person.
Think about that. This is why I'll always believe that any real discipleship program cannot simply be a classroom lecture. Because it cannot be memorizing lists of truth and untruth or things to do and things not to do. But it has to move from the classroom into the application phase, because it's in the application phase that your life gets squeezed. And what comes out of you when you're squeezed is what you really are. That's why YWAM understands this really well. They'll have a lecture phase, and then they'll take the young people overseas and rob them of sleep and give them food they don't like. And they don't have to do this deliberately. It just happens when you're overseas and you don't have any money. And put them in situations that stretch them and pull them and push them. And then pretty soon what's inside comes out, and you can go, aha! I knew it. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that thing that just happened when everything was on the line and you didn't pull your part and then we jumped in. Let's talk about that. That's discipleship.
Charles Spurgeon, the great English preacher, said this. He said, that which lies in the well of your thoughts will come up in the bucket of your speech. That which is down deep inside, that deep, dark well of your thoughts, sooner or later will come up in the bucket of your speech. Mm-hmm. Just press it long enough, squeeze it hard enough, stress it out. And so we're going to, every week, we're going to use a template that we have, and it's an encounter. And in this encounter, we're going to look at Jesus as the great physician. Okay? So you think about this. An example we're going to use this morning is the woman at the well, John chapter 4. Familiar story. Jesus comes to a town in Samaria called Sychar near the plot of ground, belonged to Jacob and his son. Jacob's well was there. Jesus was tired from the journey, sat down by the well. It's about noon. That's the scene. Along comes a Samaritan woman to draw water. Now watch how the progression unfolds. Jesus said to her, would you give me a drink? His disciples were gone buying food. The Samaritan woman said to him, you're a Jew and you're asking me, a Samaritan woman, how can you ask me for a drink? So right at the get-go, on the surface, and from her point of view, the conversation, the interaction with Jesus is about her tribe, is about politics and religion. And Jesus said, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Sir, give me this water. You have nothing to drink, nothing to draw from, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well? So you hear, she's on the wavelength of politics and religion. Jesus is below the surface talking about living water. I believe it just goes right over her head.
It's like she's saying, you think you're better than me, right? Are you better than my father Jacob? Or you think you're better than me? You got living water? You don't even have anything. You're asking me for something.
Jesus says, whoever drinks the water out of this well is going to be thirsty again. Whoever drinks the water I give will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring, interesting term, a spring of living water to eternal life. And now he's just kind of got her attention a little bit, so much so that she says, sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming back here to draw water. And now Jesus, the great physician, says, woman, he said, why don't you call your husband and come back? She said, well, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5, and the man you're with now is not your husband. What you've just said is quite true. She knows now that she's in the presence of somebody totally different. Because John would record her reaction. Oh, you're a prophet. Right? A prophet is someone who sees something that is invisible. A prophet sees something that is not seen to the naked eye. And Dr. Jesus is here with this patient. And so he describes worship to her and so forth and so on. But the template I want you to think through this is this. We start with the symptoms. Isn't that how we operate? We start with the symptoms. We go into the doctor because we have pain here or pain there, or something's not working. Symptoms are what get our attention. But symptoms are what's going on the surface. Most people who come to us for marriage counseling come to us because something is not running very well. There's heat and fire and smoke, right? We're not talking to one another. We're not sleeping with one another. We're not getting along. We argue all the time, or we don't talk. And you know what they're describing? They're describing a problem, but they're describing the problem at the symptom level. And this woman says, I'm really thirsty. I'm really thirsty. This water sounds good. I'm really thirsty. But that is not her problem. It's just a symptom of a deeper problem.
Verse 20, our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim the place where worship is Jerusalem. Woman replies, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you don't know. We worship what we do know, for salvations of the Jews. That idea that she wants to move it into, I want to move this to a comfortable talking point. Let's go back to worship, because you just pointed your finger on something that hurts. So let's go back to talking about politics and religion again. I do that myself, and as a pastor, I talk to a lot of people that get to that place. They're hurting, they want to talk, but then when you get to the place that hurts, okay, now let's talk about the weather. Now let's go back to something that's comfortable. Let's stop talking about my feelings. Let's stop talking about my relationship problems. Let's go back to something comfortable.
Jesus is trying to break a vicious cycle. Can you imagine? Think with me. I bet you there's no one in this room that hasn't been hurt in a relationship in some point in time in your life, whether it was the high school breakup, whether it was a marriage breakup, whether it was somebody that you were close to, that it didn't end well. And you say, yeah, that kind of really, really broke my heart. And he's speaking to a woman and says, 5 times, huh? I don't believe there was a bit of condemnation in his words. But I believe he's a good physician, and he's speaking to the ache. This is what the gospel does, guys. It speaks to the ache. 5 times, huh? And the one you're with now can't commit. Man, that must hurt. See, the symptoms are what get our attention. But oftentimes, symptoms require me to go into the next piece, which is the exam. How many people like guys, how many we can't wait to go to the doctor? Right? Can't wait. There's one out of the crowd, right? Can't wait to go to the doctor. Listen, we hate the exam. Why do we hate the exam? I mean, first of all, you have to put on this silly gown, right? It's like, hey, this is not who I am right now. Right? All of us, right? And then you have to get on the scale. What? That can't be right. Wait, let me take my shoes off just a second here. Right?
You know what he's describing? Vulnerability, truth, and authority. Right? You got to get vulnerable in front of somebody. You got to listen to the scale don't lie. Right? You can take off your shoes all you want. It's not going to, make that big of a difference. There's something going on here. And then there's the authority piece of, hey, my friends can tease me about my waistline or my eating habits or my, whatever. But when someone with authority says, this is what I need you to do, and you are supposed to listen to them, we don't like that combination. I don't mind being vulnerable to someone that has no authority in my life. right? That's a messed up idea of accountability. I'm going to sit around with some friends and be vulnerable with them, but none of them are going to tell me the changes I really need to make in my life. We're just going to feel better because we've unloaded on one another. Real accountability is being vulnerable in front of somebody who has the right to tell me no, right? If I tell Bruce, this is what's going on in my life, he's going to say, stop it. And I'm going to have to listen. That's a different thing. That's why this exam piece can be so uncomfortable.
Not only do they have the authority, but they actually have maybe the power and the knowledge to fix us, to heal us, right? And so she comes before Jesus, and Jesus says, I love you too much just to talk about the symptoms. I love you too much just to have the same old conversation. Hey, haven't you and I talked before? I can't tell you how many times I talk to people about the same thing over and over and over and over, and it's all on a symptom level. And they want some kind of, can you just give me an aspirin like my friend? Can you just give me some antibiotics? I know what this is. I get this all the time. Actually, sit down. No, you don't. And if you leave this place, you're not going to live to see tomorrow. Do we realize that it's more comfortable to just talk about the symptoms and get people to, I have different terms for it, but let's just play with this. Let's just massage this. Oh, I feel better. I feel better. What kind of doctor, imagine what we would think if this was your daughter that went in for that, what she self-diagnosed as bronchitis, only to find out it was a heart condition, but he said, it's probably the bronchitis. I don't want to put you through any discomfort. Here's the antibiotics, and she goes home and dies 2 days later. A good doctor is going to go from the exam to the diagnosis. And the diagnosis, a good doctor is going to tell you the truth even if it's painful. Even if it's painful, even if it's... Why? Why? Because he's trying to save our lives. Jesus is this perfect doctor. He doesn't expose us to shame us. No, on the contrary, he exposes our sin, he exposes our pain, our weakness, to heal us. That's what he's after.
There's been a lot of speculation over the years about this passage of Scripture that she was there in the middle of the day for a reason, because the time to do this was in the morning, but she would have had to have been around other women in the morning, and she would have been at the bottom of the pecking order. And so instead, she chose to do it at a time when nobody else was there. So just think about that. If that is true, and I think it's very likely that it could be true, it's just speculation, but it lines up with the facts, then she was going there at that time to avoid this conversation. And instead, she's confronted with it. But unlike every other time she's been confronted with it, whether it be another man who's saying, oh, honey, I'll give you love this time, or a woman saying, we know that one. We know what's happened there. Did you hear 5 times? Instead, she meets someone who knows the truth and has grace for her and has healing for her, all in the same place. But she has to go back to that place she does not want to go to. She has to talk about the things she does not want to talk about. She has to face the part of her that other people have faced before but have always walked away from. Instead, this guy leans in.
I'm kind of convinced that people don't come to church anymore because they're looking for Jesus. I think people come to church because they're looking for family. They're looking for a place where they can know and be known, not be judged, and be walked with. And so what does Jesus say to her? He speaks to her ache that has to be there, and he says, woman, a time is coming where you worship the Father, neither on the mountain or in Jerusalem, it doesn't matter, in a building or outside, with this tribe or that tribe. In fact, you Samaritans worship what you don't understand, what you don't know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is of the Jews. There is the authoritative piece of Dr. Jesus speaking. But a time is coming, I'm not going to exclude you. I'm not saying that to lock you out, to shame you. He said the time is coming when true worshipers are going to worship the Father in spirit and in truth. In fact, the Father is looking for people who will worship him in spirit and in truth. What he's saying is, lady, you're welcome to come. But I want to heal you. You're welcome in, but I'm not going to leave you. I love you where you are, but I love you too much to leave you there. Which brings us to the last one. So we have the symptoms that get our attention. We have the exam that makes us feel uncomfortable. And we have the diagnosis that we have to now make a decision. Between this and the last one, between 3 and 4, is the deal breaker. Because I have walked with people who have walked through these three things after hours of counseling, after hours of Bible, hours of teaching, and then they have to make a decision. Will I take the treatment? Will I do what the doctor says? Right? Have we walked out of a doctor's office with a 10-day prescription, and after 3 days we kind of feel, I feel great, I don't need these anymore, and you throw them away? And then you're sicker than you ever imagined, and you call the doctor up and they say, did you take all 10 days? Well, I was feeling better. I looked on YouTube. It said it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Between 3 and 4 is the point of change. Will you take the prescription in the way Jesus lays it out? Will you move towards the treatment, because that's where the transformation is?
Well, that's the worship team to go ahead and come back up. We want to make a point here that this can all lead up to almost sounding like, and now here's the law. Here's what you need to do. And there's doing involved, but we're saying, here's the gospel. The treatment is Jesus himself. What he introduces her to isn't just she had religion. She had plenty of religion. She didn't need more religion. She needed forgiveness. And religion doesn't bring that. Religion just brings more condemnation. She needed to be brought into a new relationship with God, a completely different relationship with God. It's a forgiveness relationship. And the only place you find that is in the person of Jesus Christ and through his suffering on the cross and his resurrection 3 days later. And so he's unpacking here for her something that isn't just, and now what I need you to do is this 10-step program. She knew the 10-step program. She couldn't fulfill it. He introduced her into someone who could fulfill it for her, and then she could partake in that.
There was a psalmist. He was a king. He was a warrior. He was a brother. He was a father. He was a writer. He was an artist. He was a songwriter. He was a lover. But he made some bad decisions that cost him dearly. It cost him the life of a child. It cost him his family was broken up. His kingdom was broken up. This man was David. And this man made a decision because his heart got away from him. He committed adultery with another man's wife. And after that was done, to protect himself, he murdered her husband. Thought he'd gotten away with it, but he didn't know how deep that had gone into his heart. And a prophet Nathan shows up one day, spins a story, brings this king face to face with who he is. Man, I'm a wretched sinner. That man would later pen these words. One of the things that makes me believe the Bible is true is it looks the mistakes of men of God square in the face. If I was writing a book to try to get people to buy, I'd edit out all the poor stuff. Not the Bible. Looks sin straight in the face, failure straight in the face. And David writes, "Hide your face from my sins, O God, and blot out my iniquity. Create in me a new heart, a pure heart, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me." At the end he says, "My sacrifice, O God, is a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart you will never turn away." This is the essence of the gospel. Jesus comes and says, "I'm going to take out your old heart and I'm going to do surgery and I'm going to put a new one in. I'm going to save you from going round and round in circles year after year. Same issues, the same fears, the same anger. I'm going to heal you at a deeper level." As we come to partake this morning of our communion service here, our Lord's Supper, I pray you take a minute before you come and do just what we're talking about. Lord, search my heart. See if there's anything in me that you'd like to flip that light on and shine. I don't want to go through religious, external kind of ritual. Lord, shine the light in the deep places of my heart. When everyone is served and you're ready, you can come up and take the elements, and we'll take together when everyone is served.